In this video right here, I'm going to show you how I took this photo right here and made it look like this by doing a lot of cool things within Adobe Lightroom. Alright, so welcome to Lightroom. Now the first thing I often like to do is to click this auto button to see what Lightroom comes up with. This is by no means like the finished product. I tweak it from here, but it's like a nice starting point in my opinion. Might drop the highlights down to -90, up with the shadows a little bit like this. Yeah, I think this is just good as it is for now. Now, the next thing I like to do is to find the crop. So if we click up here and we just use 4:5 because this is going to Instagram. And if you press O on your keyboard, you can get all of these different helping lines and just frame it up as good as you can. Now, I usually spend quite some time here because framing and composition is like key to making good photos. But for the sake of tutorials, we're just gonna do this pretty quickly and have it in the middle somewhere around here. I think looks good. Now, next thing I like to do nowadays is that before I do the tone curves, HL slider and the color grade and all that good stuff, I like to do my masks because I really want to isolate the subject as much as I can and make it stand out. So if we just start by playing around with these masks here, the sky, we can just press the sky. This is awesome in Lightroom, and we can make that a little bit more dramatic. It's also a little bit blown out, so we take the exposure down just a tiny bit. We can take the highlights on it a little bit too. And then what I would like to do also is to scroll down to dehaze. If you drag up the dehaze, you make the sky more dramatic. This is like the extreme version. We can all agree that this is like not good at all. But just a tiny bit here and the sky becomes more dramatic. You can even up the clarity a tiny bit on it as well. Something like this. Now, what's often happens when you're playing with the dehaze slider is like I think the colors become a little bit too much. So I often like to compensate for that by dragging down the exposure. No, not the exposure, the saturation a tiny bit on it as well. And I think this is a good starting point. Now, here's a good example of these auto AI masks ain't always perfect. I saw that it's adding one little here too. So if you click on it and click minus and we just take a brush, we can take away this here. So if you press O, you can see where the mask is. Everything that is red is the mask, and now the mask is not affecting this area anymore. And we can press enter. Next thing I like to do is to grab a radial gradient filter like this, and if we press H, you can see the lines. If you press H again, you like make them disappear. But we want to see what we are doing, and what I would like to do is to add one in the middle and really opening up the middle like this. So we do it something like this. And again, I'm doing this pretty fast right now. This I usually spend quite some time in because like the more time you're willing to spend on your images, the better they will become. So I'm really going back and forth and tweaking as much as I can. But for the sake of this tutorial, let's do it like this right now. We can up the shadows a little bit, up with the whites, even up with the highlights a tiny bit, like this. Let me see. You can even take off the clarity tiny bit, because we're going to take it a little bit down later. You see what I mean in a second. And the contrast, like when I'm opening up the shadows this much, you're losing a lot of contrast. So I always like to like take that up a little bit to compensate for that. And I think this is a nice point for now. Next thing I like to do is to add another gradient filter and do it around here. No, here this one is. But I would like to invert this one. So we invert it like so, and now we're just gonna drag down the exposure. So basically I want to further enhance the illusion of like making the subject stand out on the photo by doing this. Obviously not this much, but this is like the effect we're going for, but very subtle. So just take the exposure down ever so slightly because I don't want this to be, you know, like we're creating a vignette here, but I don't want it to be heavy. I just want it to be super subtle. We might even make it a tiny bit bigger and feather it out a little bit more. Something like this, I think looks good. Like this is so like little adjustments, but it's going to make a big difference in the end. Then I would like to do another mask, and we're going to click subject. Now, I was hoping that the mask would only target the boat here, but it did think that everything in the subject, but that's okay. I want to brighten this area up either way, so we can brighten it up a little bit more. Up with the whites, up with the shadows, maybe a little bit of exposure, tiny bit of contrast, a little bit of highlight. And I think this is all right to start with. This is all right, not bad at all. Now I want to target the boat a little bit more, and I do that with a brush. So a new mask and a brush, and we can punch in quite a bit. It's maybe a little bit too much, like so. Again, a little bit too much. I'm so sorry. Please not unlike the video now that you've already liked it, right? And this is again too big, like 200, perfect. And we're just gonna brush it. Now you can have the auto mask on if you want. It's gonna help you like keep your mask in lines, but that's totally up to you. Sometimes it works wonders, sometimes it doesn't. Like good to just try and see whatever works for you. Now if you go out of lines, there's no problem if you hold in Option on your keyboard, or is it like Alt on a PC. You can like get this minus like erase tool and you just erase the edges. And I have the auto mask on, so it's gonna help me just erase them pretty neatly. Now for a second tutorial, this doesn't have to be more perfect than this. And now we have the mask on here. And I think this is awesome for now. I also want to add another mask on the reflection itself. Just quickly do it like this, something. Now if you want to, you could like do a mask on the leading line. I don't know, I don't think it's maybe necessary right here, but you could. But I want to add a gradient filter and one of these, and I want to darken this here. I like to add a few of them with different sets of exposure and like different how much gradient there is. You might maybe want to do everything in one, but this is like a little technique that I like. Do what you want with it. You can follow my advice or like comment that Icelandic guy, you suck. While you like the video, while you like the video, you know? So we take down the exposure a little bit. So this is the effect that we are creating. We don't want to make it too much. We're just like closing a little bit more in on the subject like this, and yeah, and a little bit up with the contrast. And then I want to add one more that we do, and this one is going to be a little bit higher, like so, but still a little bit gradient. And it's also going to be a little bit subtle, like this. Now, another thing I like to do too is to add another mask like this, a new radiant gradient. We're going to add like here, and I'm going to emphasize on the light source that is coming from here. The sun is here, and I'm going to emphasize on it like this. So we will make it something like this. And basically what I do here, I drag up the dehaze. No, not up, we're dragging it down. So this is the effect that is happening, but this is obviously extreme for, you know, demonstrational purposes, but we just do it ever so slightly to get a little bit more light in, and then drown with the clarity to soften that light that's coming in. And I think this is a beautiful little effect, and I really like it. And you can just play around with the position of it, how far away you want it to be, but just here in the end, and it looks good. Now, I'll probably come back to this later, but just with the masks, we've taken the photo from looking like this to this, and it's a huge difference. Now let us play with the colors, and then we go into the tone curve and some other cool tips too that I do here. Now, first thing, before I go to the HSL slider that we see right here, I like to go all the way down here and to the calibration. Basically, I just like to set like a base tone on my photo. So if we take the red primary up to 20, the blue primary to -30, and then the green primary to +7, I think this is like a nice base color that we have, all right? Then we can go to the HSL slider, and here a lot of fun happens. Like Lightroom is just so powerful when it comes to messing with the colors and tones. Now there isn't a lot of red in the photo, but there is orange, and since we don't have to worry about skin tones, we can take this down quite a lot, because I really want to make the boat that is like primary orange subject here be really like red, oaky feeling, you know, not like this. It just blends in with the foliage on the, you know, like behind it. But if we take it down, you can really see how it starts to get like some deep orange colors. I like that, like some red orange. Now the yellow, I think that I actually want to take that up to further like get the boat to pop. And also this was summertime. Maybe we take it up like this to get the trees behind it a little bit more green. Now the green colors, I want to make them a little bit greener too. So we can have that up here. And then the aqua, take up the aqua a little bit. And the blue colors, I want to drag them down just a tiny bit more to the teal, like this. And purple, there isn't that much purple, but we can have it like a little bit down to -15. Now with the saturation, we are going to do this right here. So let me see. And when it comes to the blue, I would like to take it down quite a bit and reintroduce blue later. For me, when I'm working with landscape photos, especially when there are mountains, there are a lot of like weird colors within the mountains that sit in the blue and in the purple. And by taking away saturation there, I think, like, in my opinion, I make the mountain look prettier. And it's a pretty cool look too. So we can take it down to like -55. And the purple, I want to take it down as well, a little bit like this. And then we will work with the luminance of the colors. And for here, I'm thinking about doing something like this. Alright, so with the HSL slider, we've messed with the colors quite a bit, and I think we got a nice little base tone for us to keep on working on this photo. And the next thing I like to do is to go to the color grade, and then we go to the tone curve. So the color grade, this is an extremely fun little tool that Lightroom has. So you can basically push colors within the shadows, midtones, and highlights, but it's clicking on this color wheel and finding whatever color that you like. Now you can do it like this, or you can go down here and simply just mess with the hue here and the saturation down here. Now I know that I like the hue 215, it's a nice blue color, and I want to have it maybe in like the 25, something like this. Now if you want, you can also mess with the luminance of the shadows here. It's like totally up to you, you don't have to do that every time you see you can do something, but you can play around with it. Now for the midtones, I would like to compensate for that and get a little bit of orange in it. I think we're gonna go with like a pretty red one, like 29, and we just keep it at around plus 10, I think is good. And here I would actually like to up the luminance a little bit to make the midtones stand out a little bit more. And then we do the highlights, and for the highlights I want a blue color. Maybe we don't have to have the same blue color as on the shadows. Let me see. Maybe we can do them a little bit. Let's have them a little bit more teal, like here, 210. It's not that much, but we keep them in the 18. And the luminance we can take down a tiny bit here. What I want to show you at the moment is this blending tab. Here you can actually play around a little bit more if you like. So let's take this down to 30. And then in the balance slider, this basically lets you know, like if you take it to the right side, the highlights are more dominant. And if you take it to the left side, the shadows are more dominant. So I want to keep this up just a tiny bit somewhere around here. And this does a huge difference with just introducing that cold tones to this photo. Now this photo now lacks quite a lot of contrast in my opinion, and now I want to work with the tone curves. Now for this tone curve, I just want to keep it simple, so we add like 3 spots here. A nice tip with the tone curve when you're working on it is that if you hold Alt on your keyboard or Option on a Mac, you make the tone curve move slower, so it's easier to be precise. If I don't hold it, it moves pretty fast, and I like to be a little bit precise when I'm working here. I also would like to introduce a little bit fade, not too much like back in the day when everybody was doing fades that looks like this. So basically you're just telling Lightroom that the blacks are no longer totally black and you get fade in it. But too much is like, this is not cool. But this used to be really cool. Times change and trends with it, you know? And I think this is nice. For the sake of the tutorial, let's just keep it like here. Now, usually with clarity, I like to take it down on my photos nowadays, even landscape photos, just like it makes the photos softer, and I like that soft look. However, I have a little trick that is much better than doing this. I'll show you that a little bit later on. So, because I know I want to do that, I want to add up clarity just a tiny bit, and then we'll soften the image later. And we can take the texture up like plus 2 maybe. It's getting a little bit more. And then dehaze plus 1. The vibrance, we can probably take it up to 21, but compensate a little bit to get down the down with the saturation tiny bit as well. And this is starting to look pretty good. Now with all of these sliders in Lightroom, I do a whole lot of coming back and forth. I like to stand up, come back to the photo and see like if I've overdone it somewhere or whatnot. I might think that in this photo maybe the blues here are a little bit overdone and the sky is a little bit weird. We're clipping the sky right here, it's too white, and I'll fix that a little bit later. But for now, let's go down to the details right here. I will do that in a second. First, let's go down to the effects. I like to add a little bit of vignette. We can do like minus 15, something like this. But again, let's open up the feather. So feather it out, and we can open up the highlights, making the highlights come in. And then with the grain, we can add grain to 25. I think this is starting to look pretty good. Now what I would like to do now is that I think that the mask that I have on everything here, I think this is a little bit too strong. So I'm gonna take this down a little bit like this. I think the mountain here became a little bit too much, and this one is probably a little bit too much too. So it's a little bit too bright, like so. Now this is starting to look pretty decent. Here in the detail, I often like to sharpen it a tiny bit, and then I would like to mask it out. So if you hold Option, you can see what you're masking. So we can mask it up to like 75, so only that are the sharpened. But this button here is so good. This is a new like AID noise, and it's so good. If you have a raw file, you can just click it here and see what the Lightroom does. And it's just huge. Like not only are we getting less noise, but it's also way more, like it's way sharper in the background. So you get it's sharper and less noisy. It's a no-brainer. I love this feature. Click S Enhance, and watch Lightroom do its magic. Now, I did go and do a few adjustments also on the mask. I thought they were a little bit too much, make the sky a little bit brighter and everything, but I think this is starting to look pretty cool. Now, I know that you also want to take this photo to the next level, and there is a few things that you can do, and one is that, as you can see, there is a lot of this foliage everywhere in the water, and I actually just removed it, and you can see the between and after. It's subtle, but it's huge. It just makes the entire photo more cleaner. The water becomes much cleaner. There's less distractions in it. Really helping us further focusing on what we want our viewers to see within the photo. You do this by clicking the button up here, and then I like to use this one. I think this is like content aware fill, and by just zooming in, this is quite tedious. You can drag down the size like this. If you hold in spacebar, and then you get this hand, then you can move everywhere. And basically, it's just clicking, and Lightroom is going to remove it. And you can click the next one and next one. Now, if you see everything like this, you have these circles, so you can just press H and it's going to hide it. And then just listen to some good music or good podcast, and you remove this, baby. Alright, so for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to leave it like this, but I want to see the before and after. So this is without the mask, and this is with it. So you're basically just cleaning up the water, and in my opinion, this looks a lot better. Now, the next thing I usually do is to go through all the sliders and masks and see if I can further enhance it and tweak it. Maybe I've overdone something, maybe I've underdone something, and I like to stand up every now and then and come back with fresh eyes and look at the photo. So my final step when I'm editing my photos is that I like to add this beautiful glow to them. I just think that it makes it elevates them even further. It's not that hard to do, and if you take a look at this video next, I'll show you the entire process.